When people looked at Shakur Taylor, they saw a successful businessman. They saw the expensive vehicles. They saw the beautiful home. They saw the thriving construction company that seemed to grow larger every year. What they didn't see was the pain that built it all. At 33 years old, Shakur had already lived through enough hardship to break most people. Long before the success, long before the money, long before the respect, there was loss. The kind of loss that changes a person forever. Shakur was only 10 years old when tragedy took both of his parents. One moment he had a family. The next moment he was standing at a funeral trying to understand why life could be so cruel. The grief was overwhelming. The loneliness was worse. As the years passed, Shakur learned something important. Nobody was coming to save him. Nobody was going to hand him opportunities. Nobody was going to build his future for him. If he wanted a better life, he would have to create it himself. While other teenagers spent weekends partying and wasting time, Shakur worked. He mowed lawns. He carried lumber. He cleaned construction sites. He learned everything he could about building. Something about construction fascinated him. Maybe it was because buildings reminded him of life. A strong foundation could withstand almost anything. A weak one would eventually collapse. By the time he graduated high school, he had already earned a reputation as one of the hardest working young men in town. It was during those years that he met Trey. Trey Williams was charismatic, funny, confident, the type of person who could make friends anywhere. The two became inseparable. They played basketball together, worked odd jobs together, talked about the future together. For years, Trey was the closest thing Shakur had to a brother. As they entered adulthood, their paths began to separate. Shakur remained focused. Trey chased excitement. Shakur worked overtime. Trey spent money as quickly as he earned it. Shakur invested. Trey partied. Still, the friendship survived. Or at least it appeared to. At 26 years old, Shakur's life changed again. This time for the better. He met Chelsie Dutton. The first time he saw her was at a charity event hosted by a local business organization. The room was crowded. Music played softly in the background. People mingled around expensive tables. Yet somehow his attention immediately landed on one person, Chelsie. She was confident, beautiful, intelligent. And unlike most people he met after becoming successful, she seemed interested in him rather than his money. Their conversations lasted hours. One date became several. Several dates became a relationship. Within 2 years, they were married. For a while, life felt perfect. Shakur worked hard. Chelsie supported him. Their future seemed limitless. Or so he thought. The first warning signs came from her family, specifically her parents, Stacy Dutton and Charles Dutton. From the beginning, neither seemed impressed by Shakur's accomplishments. No matter how successful he became, it was never enough. When he bought his first luxury vehicle, Charles called it unnecessary. When he purchased a larger home, Stacy suggested he was showing off. When his company landed major contracts, they claimed he was simply lucky. At family gatherings, their comments became predictable. Charles would sip his drink and shake his head. Construction comes and goes. Stacy would nod. Business success doesn't last forever. The words were always delivered with a smile, but everyone knew what they meant. They didn't believe in him. Not really. No matter how much he provided for their daughter, no matter how much he accomplished, no matter how many obstacles he overcame, Nothing changed their opinion. The only exception was Chelsea's younger brother, Charlie Dutton. Unlike the rest of the family, Charlie admired Shakur. At 23 years old, he saw something inspiring in the man everyone else underestimated. Whenever Shakur discussed business, Charlie listened carefully. Whenever Shakur offered advice, Charlie took notes. Whenever Shakur talked about goals, Charlie paid attention. One evening after a family barbecue, Charlie found himself sitting beside Shakur on the back patio. The sun was setting. The guests were beginning to leave. "You know something?" Charlie said. "What?" "One day I want to build something like you did." Shakur smiled. "You can build something bigger." Charlie laughed. "Not a chance." "Why not?" "Because you're different." Shakur looked at him. "No, I'm not." Charlie appeared confused. "You built a company from nothing. So can you. People don't just do that." Shakur leaned back in his chair. "People do it every day. Most just quit before they get there." Those words stayed with Charlie for years. Meanwhile, Shakur's company continued growing. Projects expanded, revenue increased, employees multiplied. By 32 years old, he had everything he once dreamed about: a successful business, financial freedom, a beautiful wife, a large home, a respected reputation. Life seemed stable, secure, unbreakable. Then came the first crack in the foundation. At first it was subtle. Chelsie became distant. Phone calls suddenly ended when he entered rooms. Business trips seemed more frequent. Conversations became shorter. Excuses became common. Whenever he asked if something was wrong, she smiled. "I'm fine." Whenever he expressed concern, she reassured him. "You're imagining things." Shakur wanted to believe her. After all, she was his wife, the woman he loved, the woman he trusted. Unfortunately, trust can blind even the smartest people, and betrayal often arrives disguised as normalcy. Months passed. The distance grew. The warning signs multiplied. Still, Shakur focused on work. He believed every marriage experienced difficult periods. He believed they would get through it. He believed love was enough. What he didn't know was that the two people he trusted most were hiding a secret capable of destroying everything he had built. One rainy afternoon, while reviewing blueprints in his office, his phone vibrated. An unknown number. No name, no message, just 3 photographs. Curious, he opened the first image. His stomach immediately tightened. The second image made his heart race. The third image changed his life forever. There was Chelsie, his wife, standing beside Trey, his best friend. The two weren't standing like friends. They weren't talking like friends. They were embracing, kissing, smiling, holding each other as though they were in love. For several moments, Shakur simply stared. His mind refused to process what his eyes clearly saw. This couldn't be real. It had to be fake, some kind of misunderstanding, some cruel joke. His hands began shaking. His breathing became uneven. A cold sensation spread through his chest. The room suddenly felt smaller. The walls seemed closer. His vision blurred. Immediately he called Chelsie. No answer. He called again. Nothing. Then he called Trey. Straight to voicemail. Again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. The silence told him everything. By the time evening arrived, Shakur was sitting alone in his living room, waiting, praying, hoping there was another explanation. Then the front door opened. Chelsie walked inside. The moment their eyes met, he knew. Before a single word was spoken, he knew. And in that instant, the foundation of his entire world began to crumble. The moment Chelsie walked through the front door, the silence felt heavier than concrete. Shakur sat in the living room holding his phone. The photographs were still open on the screen. His heart wanted an explanation. His mind already knew the truth. Chelsie stopped when she saw his face. Then she noticed the phone in his hand. The color drained from her face. For several seconds, neither spoke. Neither moved. Neither looked away. Finally, Shakur broke the silence. "Tell me it isn't true." His voice was calm, too calm, the kind of calm that only exists when someone is trying desperately not to fall apart. Chelsie lowered her eyes. "Shakur, tell me it isn't true." Tears began forming in her eyes. But he wasn't interested in tears, not now. Not after what he'd seen. Not after months of lies. "Look at me," he said. Slowly, she lifted her head. "How long?" The question hung in the air. Chelsea's lips trembled. "Almost a year." The words hit him like a freight train. A year. 12 months. 365 days. A year of lies. A year of betrayal. A year of pretending. Every anniversary. Every family gathering. Every vacation. Every kiss. Every promise. All of it poisoned by a secret affair. Shakur stood up, his hands clenched into fists, not because he wanted to hurt anyone, because he was trying to keep himself together. "A year," he repeated. Chelsie started crying. "I'm sorry. Sorry," his voice cracked. "You looked me in my eyes every day for a year. I'm sorry. You sat across from me at dinner. I'm sorry. You slept beside me every night." Chelsie collapsed into a chair, sobbing, but the tears couldn't repair what had been broken. Then came the question he dreaded asking. "Why?" Chelsie covered her face. For a long time, she said nothing. Finally, she spoke. "I felt like you loved your business more than me." Shakur stared at her in disbelief. Everything he built had been for them. The house, the cars, the vacations, the security, the future. Every sacrifice was for their future together. Yet somehow she convinced herself she wasn't loved. And instead of talking to him, she ran to Trey, his best friend, the man he trusted like family. That night, Shakur packed a small bag and left. Not because the house belonged to her, because staying there felt impossible. Every wall reminded him of a lie. Every room reminded him of betrayal. Every memory suddenly felt fake. He drove for hours. No destination. No plan. No answers. Just pain. Pure pain. The weeks that followed became the darkest period of his life. The divorce was ugly. Very ugly. Lawyers got involved. Arguments escalated. Assets were divided. Accusations flew. By the time everything was finalized, Shakur felt like he had been stripped of his entire identity. The house was gone. The luxury vehicles were gone. Large portions of his assets disappeared. Years of work vanished through legal documents and court proceedings. He wasn't broke. But compared to what he once had, it felt that way. The man who once owned a mansion found himself signing a lease for a small apartment. The apartment wasn't much. 1 bedroom, a tiny kitchen, a small balcony overlooking a parking lot. Nothing luxurious, nothing impressive. The first night there felt unbearable. He sat on a mattress placed directly on the floor. No furniture, no decorations, no family, no wife, no best friend. Just silence. For the first time in years, Shakur cried. Not because he lost money, not because he lost status, not because he lost possessions, because he lost people he loved, people he would have done anything for. And somehow that hurt far more. Months passed, then a year, then another. Life became routine. Wake up, work, come home, sleep, repeat. The successful businessman who once managed major construction projects now accepted whatever work he could find. Warehouse shifts, labor jobs, equipment operations, overnight assignments, anything that paid the bills. Many people who once called themselves friends disappeared. Business associates stopped calling. Former colleagues moved on. People love success, but many disappear when adversity arrives, Shakur noticed, and he remembered. Meanwhile, Chelsie and Trey were living what appeared to be their dream relationship, at least from the outside. Social media showed smiling photographs, vacations, date nights, fancy dinners. To outsiders, they looked happy. But appearances can be deceiving. The same betrayal that brought them together slowly began destroying them. Trey wasn't the man Chelsie thought he was. Without Shakur's influence, Trey's true nature became impossible to ignore. He lacked discipline. He lacked consistency. He lacked accountability. Money disappeared quickly. Promises went unfulfilled. Arguments became frequent. Trust issues emerged. After all, if someone is willing to betray one person, how difficult is it to betray another? Meanwhile, Shakur remained focused on rebuilding, not publicly, privately. Every evening after work, he returned to his apartment and sat at a small folding table. There, he designed structures, buildings, commercial developments, industrial facilities, entire communities. His apartment slowly filled with scale models. Hundreds of hours of work covered shelves and tables. Some nights he worked until 3 a.m. Some nights he barely slept. But every design sharpened his skills. Every model improved his vision. Every setback strengthened his determination. What nobody realized was that Shakur wasn't just healing. He was preparing. 3 years passed. Then one rainy Tuesday evening, everything changed. Shakur had just returned home from work. His boots were muddy. His back hurt. His hands were sore. He was heating leftovers in the microwave when his phone rang. The caller ID displayed a name he hadn't seen in years. Mark Reynolds, an old friend from his early construction days. Shakur answered. Mark? Still working harder than everybody else? A small smile crossed Shakur's face. Trying. Mark laughed. I heard you've been hiding. Something like that. Then Mark's tone changed. I've got something you need to hear. Shakur listened. A large development project was coming. Massive. Hundreds of acres. Commercial buildings. Warehouses. Office complexes. Infrastructure. The entire project was worth tens of millions. Mark had influence with the investors, and he had made a recommendation. One name, one person, one builder. Shakur Taylor. For a moment, Shakur said nothing. The opportunity sounded impossible. After everything he'd lost, after everything he'd been through. Could this really be happening? Mark answered the question before it was asked. You built your first company from nothing. Silence. You can do it again. Shakur stared at the structural models surrounding him. Years of work. Years of sacrifice, years of preparation. Maybe this wasn't luck. Maybe this was the opportunity he had been preparing for all along. What happens if I fail? Shakur asked. Mark laughed. You've already survived losing everything. Another pause. Then Mark spoke words that would change the course of Shakur's life forever. The only thing left to do now is win. That night, for the first time in 3 years, Shakur felt something he thought he had lost. Belief. Not belief in luck, not belief in revenge, belief in himself. And within 12 months, the same people who counted him out would watch him build something even greater than before. A company worth over $200 million. A legacy no one could ignore, and a comeback nobody saw coming. That night, after getting off the phone with Mark Reynolds, Shakur Taylor didn't sleep. He sat alone in his small apartment surrounded by years of structural models. Every building, every design, every blueprint, every late-night idea. Suddenly, they no longer looked like reminders of what he had lost. They looked like the foundation of what was coming. For 3 years, while everyone thought he was broken, Shakur had been sharpening his skills. While people assumed he was defeated, he had been studying, planning, learning, growing. The pain that nearly destroyed him had also transformed him. At sunrise, he made a decision. He wasn't going to spend the rest of his life looking backward. He wasn't going to waste another day thinking about Chelsie. He wasn't going to waste another second worrying about Trey. He was going to build. Again. Only this time, he would build something bigger than anyone imagined. Within 2 weeks, paperwork was filed. Investors were contacted. Meetings were scheduled. And a new company was born, Taylor Structural Development Group. The name spread quickly through the industry. Some people were excited. Others were skeptical. Many remembered his previous success. Others remembered his public downfall. A few quietly predicted failure. One of those people happened to be Charles Dutton. When he heard about Shakur starting over, he laughed. He already had his chance. Stacy agreed. People don't get lucky twice. Meanwhile, Charlie Dutton sat silently at the dinner table. Because unlike his parents, he understood something they didn't. Shakur's success had never been luck. It had always been discipline. While others slept, he worked. While others complained, he learned. While others quit, he continued. That difference changes everything. 3 months after launching the company, Mark introduced Shakur to a group of investors overseeing one of the largest commercial development projects in the state. The meeting lasted 6 hours. Executives filled the conference room. Millions of dollars were at stake. Some of the investors seemed unsure. Others questioned whether Shakur could handle a project of that scale after spending years away from the spotlight. Then Shakur stood up. For the next 45 minutes, he presented a vision so detailed and impressive that the room became completely silent. Every challenge had a solution. Every risk had a strategy. Every concern had an answer. When he finished speaking, nobody asked questions, because there weren't any left to ask. 3 days later, his phone rang. The contract was his. The project was worth tens of millions. But more importantly, it represented opportunity. The opportunity to prove everyone wrong. Construction began immediately. Shakur attacked the project with the same hunger that built his first company. He arrived before sunrise, left after dark, reviewed plans personally, inspected job sites himself. Employees quickly noticed something unusual. Their CEO wasn't sitting behind a desk. He was working alongside them. That earned respect, and respect built loyalty. 6 months into the project, the impossible started happening. The development finished ahead of schedule. Costs remained under budget. Investors were thrilled. News spread through the business community. More contracts followed. Then more. Then more. Warehouses, office complexes, manufacturing facilities, residential developments. Taylor Structural Development Group became the hottest company in the industry. Revenue exploded. Growth accelerated. Investors lined up. Within 12 months, financial analysts estimated the company's value at over $200 million. $200 million in 1 year. The same man who had once sat alone in a tiny apartment now owned one of the fastest-growing development companies in the country. The comeback was complete, or so everyone thought, because the real surprises were only beginning. One afternoon, Shakur received an unexpected visitor, Charlie Dutton. The young man walked into the corporate headquarters carrying a folder and wearing a nervous expression. Shakur smiled. "Charlie." "Good to see you, Shakur." The two shook hands. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Charlie took a deep breath. "I want to work here." Shakur laughed. "That's why you're nervous?" Charlie smiled. "A little." "What makes you think I'd say no?" Charlie's expression softened. "After everything that happened with my family, I wasn't sure." Shakur leaned back in his chair. "Your family isn't you." Those 4 words nearly brought tears to Charlie's eyes, because for years he had felt trapped between loyalty to his family and admiration for Shakur. Now he didn't have to choose. A week later, Charlie joined the company as Assistant Director of Operations. The decision proved brilliant. Charlie worked hard, learned quickly, stayed humble. Employees respected him because he earned respect rather than demanding it. Within months, he became one of the most trusted members of the organization. The partnership reminded many people of what Shakur and Trey once had. The difference was loyalty, something money couldn't buy. Meanwhile, across town, Chelsea's life looked very different. The relationship with Trey had completely fallen apart. The man she left everything for wasn't who she imagined, not even close. Trey struggled financially. Job opportunities disappeared. His reputation suffered. Arguments became constant. Trust disappeared. Resentment replaced affection. Eventually, the relationship collapsed entirely. The breakup was ugly, painful, public. And when it ended, Chelsie found herself sitting alone in a small apartment, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. One evening, she came across a business magazine while waiting in line at a grocery store. The cover stopped her cold. There, smiling confidently beside a newly completed commercial development, stood Shakur Taylor. The headline read, "The Comeback Nobody Saw Coming." Chelsea's hands began shaking. She bought the magazine immediately. Then she sat in her car reading every page. The article detailed his journey, the struggles, the sacrifices, the rebuilding process, the $200 million company, the charitable projects, the jobs he created, the people he helped. By the time she finished reading, tears filled her eyes. Not because of the money, not because of the success, because she realized something painful. The man on those pages was the same man she once promised to love forever. The same man who remained loyal. The same man who fought for their future. The same man she abandoned. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to think honestly. Trey had not stolen her heart. She had given it away, and now the consequences were impossible to ignore. A few weeks later, another surprise arrived. Charles Dutton called Charlie. His voice sounded unusually friendly. "How's work?" Charlie nearly laughed. His father hadn't shown interest in his job for years. "It's good." "I hear Shakur's doing well." Charlie immediately understood. For years, Charles criticized Shakur. Now that Shakur was worth hundreds of millions, his tone had changed. Interesting. Very interesting. The same thing happened with Stacy. Suddenly, she spoke positively about Shakur. Suddenly, she remembered his good qualities. Suddenly, she talked about reconnecting. Charlie noticed. So did everyone else. especially Shakur, because success has a way of revealing people's true intentions. When you have nothing, people show you who they are. When you have everything, they show you what they want. And Shakur had learned that lesson the hard way. One Friday evening, after finishing a meeting with investors, Shakur stood alone in his office overlooking the city skyline. The sun was setting. The same city that once watched him fall, now watched him rise. His phone buzzed. An unknown number. Normally, he would ignore it. For some reason, he answered. The voice on the other end instantly froze him. "Hello, Shakur." It was Chelsie. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then she quietly said the words she had rehearsed countless times. "Can we talk?" And suddenly, the chapter Shakur thought was finished threatened to reopen once again. Because some wounds heal, but others leave scars that last forever. For several seconds, Shakur Taylor stood motionless in his office. The city lights glowed through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind him. Investors had spent the day congratulating him. Employees celebrated another successful quarter. The company continued growing. Everything he once thought he had lost had somehow returned. Yet one simple voice from the past had the power to stop him in his tracks. "Hello, Shakur." "Chelsie." 3 years. 3 years since the divorce. 3 years since the betrayal. 3 years since she walked away. And now she wanted to talk. Shakur closed his eyes for a moment. Not because he was angry, because he was surprised by how little anger remained. Time had a way of changing things. Pain that once felt unbearable eventually became memory. Wounds that once felt permanent eventually became scars. The hurt never completely disappeared, but it no longer controlled him. "What do you want to talk about?" he asked calmly. The silence on the other end lasted several seconds. Finally, Chelsie answered. "I owe you an apology." Shakur looked out at the city. Years ago, hearing those words would have meant everything. Now they felt different, not meaningless, just late. Very late. After a long pause, he spoke. "Meet me tomorrow." The next afternoon, they met at a quiet coffee shop on the edge of town. The location wasn't fancy, it wasn't romantic, it wasn't emotional, it was neutral. When Shakur arrived, Chelsie was already seated. For a moment, neither spoke. The years had changed both of them. Shakur looked stronger, more confident, more peaceful. Chelsie looked tired, not physically, emotionally, like someone carrying years of regret. Eventually, she broke the silence. "You look good?" Shakur smiled politely. "Thank you." Tears immediately formed in her eyes, because she realized something. The kindness in his voice remained. The respect remained. The character remained. The same man she left behind was still there, only stronger. "I was wrong." The words came quietly, but they carried enormous weight. Shakur listened. "I blamed you for things that weren't your fault." More tears followed. "I convinced myself that you didn't love me." Her voice trembled. "But you did." She lowered her head. "You always did." The silence between them stretched for several moments. Then she looked directly at him. "I made the biggest mistake of my life." For the first time since arriving, Shakur's expression softened. Not because he wanted her back, because he understood something. Regret was already punishing her more than he ever could. There was no revenge left to seek. Life had handled that part on its own. Chelsie wiped tears from her face. "I don't expect forgiveness." Shakur nodded. "I know." "I don't expect another chance." Again he nodded. "I know." "Then why did you agree to meet me?" For several moments he thought about the answer. Then he spoke honestly. Because carrying hate is exhausting. Chelsie stared at him. You hate me? No. The answer surprised her. I don't hate you. What do you feel? Shakur looked out the window, then back at her. Nothing. The words landed harder than anger ever could. Because the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. And for the first time, Chelsie understood that the chapter she desperately wanted to revisit had already ended. Meanwhile, across town, another life was unraveling. Trey Williams sat alone inside a small apartment. The contrast between his life and Shakur's couldn't have been greater. His finances were a mess. Relationships were strained. Opportunities had dried up. People no longer viewed him as the charismatic friend everyone loved. Instead, many remembered him as the man who betrayed his best friend. Reputation takes years to build, minutes to destroy. Trey had learned that lesson too late. One evening he found himself watching an interview featuring Shakur on television. The reporter asked a simple question. What's the secret to your success? Trey expected Shakur to mention business strategies, investments, leadership. Instead, Shakur answered differently. The hardest moments of my life forced me to become stronger than I ever planned to be. Trey stared at the screen. For the first time, he truly understood. The betrayal that nearly destroyed Shakur had actually transformed him. And the betrayal that seemed to benefit Trey had ultimately destroyed him. A few weeks later, Stacy and Charles Doughton requested a meeting. Shakur wasn't surprised. Their sudden interest had become obvious. The meeting took place at company headquarters. When they arrived, Charlie greeted them. The same son whose opinions they had ignored for years. The same son who had believed in Shakur from the beginning. As they walked through the building, they were stunned. Employees moved with purpose. Projects filled screens. Executives hurried between meetings. Success surrounded them everywhere. Eventually, they entered Shakur's office. Charles smiled. Quite a place. Shakur nodded politely. Thank you. The conversation started awkwardly. Then Charles finally addressed the obvious. I owe you an apology. Shakur remained silent. Charles sighed heavily. For years, I underestimated you. Stacy nodded. We both did. Neither excuse sounded convincing, because everyone in the room understood the truth. Their opinions changed only after the money returned, only after the success returned, only after the headlines returned. Shakur noticed. So did Charlie. Then something unexpected happened. Charlie spoke. I tried telling you years ago. The room became silent. Charles looked at his son. You did. You never listened. No one argued, because it was true. For years, Charlie saw what others refused to see. Character, work ethic, integrity, the things that matter most. Not once had he abandoned Shakur. Not once had he changed sides. Not once had he stopped believing. That loyalty mattered, and Shakur never forgot it. A few months later, Charlie received a promotion. Assistant director became chief operations officer. The announcement surprised many people, not because he lacked talent, because of how quickly he earned the role. But those who worked closely with him weren't surprised at all. He had earned it, every hour, every project, every challenge. Most importantly, he had earned Shakur's trust, something far more valuable than any title. One evening, after another successful year, the company hosted a celebration. Employees filled a large banquet hall. Investors attended. Community leaders attended. Families attended. It felt less like a corporate event and more like a family reunion. Toward the end of the evening, Shakur stepped onto the stage. The room became quiet. Everyone expected a speech about business success. Instead, they got something different, something personal, something real. Shakur looked across the crowd, then began speaking. People often ask how I came back after losing everything. The room listened carefully. The truth is, I didn't come back because I was strong. A few confused expressions appeared. I came back because quitting wasn't an option. The audience remained silent. When I lost my parents, life taught me resilience. When I lost my marriage, life taught me perspective. When I lost my business, life taught me humility. He paused, then continued. And when people doubted me, life taught me determination. The room erupted into applause. But Shakur wasn't finished. Never allow another person's opinion to become your identity. The applause stopped. Everyone listened. People will doubt you. People will betray you. People will leave. People will underestimate you. His voice grew stronger. But none of those things determine your future. He looked toward Charlie, then across the crowd. The only thing that determines your future is what you do after the setback. The room stood to its feet. A standing ovation filled the hall. Many employees wiped away tears. Investors applauded. Families cheered. And for a brief moment, Shakur looked upward, thinking about his parents, the people who never got the chance to see what he became, the people whose lessons still guided him every day. In that moment, he realized something important. Success wasn't the money. It wasn't the company. It wasn't the headlines. Success was becoming the man he needed to become, a man who survived loss, a man who survived betrayal, a man who built a legacy from pain. Months later, as Shakur stood on a balcony overlooking one of his newest developments, he received a message from Charlie. It contained a simple photograph. The image showed hundreds of workers helping complete a project that would create jobs for thousands of families. Underneath the picture was a short message. "You built more than buildings." Shakur smiled. Then he looked across the skyline. The same skyline that once witnessed his fall. The same skyline that now celebrated his rise. And as the sun disappeared beyond the horizon, one truth became impossible to ignore. The people who counted him out had underestimated more than his talent. They had underestimated his ability to rise. Again, and again, and again. Because some people are successful when life is easy. Others become legendary when life becomes difficult. And Shakur Taylor had become something far greater than successful. He had become unforgettable. The end.